a fisherman, smacking pirates in the face with your big rod. In 9 Monkeys of Shaolin. Are beat-em-ups always best with a buddy? The character models in 9 Monkeys of Shaolin are pretty simplistic, with a sculpted, polygonal look and exaggerated features. The environments are the real standout, with interesting use of light, shadow, and color in each level. What levels lack in detail, they make up for in style, but the game sometimes prioritizes style over practicality. The lighting and color schemes look cool, but they blend character and enemy models together to a confusing degree, where for brief moments, it's hard to distinguish anything. Menus and cutscenes have small, difficult-to-read text, and available upgrades in the menu are distinguished by a very light gold outline that's almost impossible to see. Minute-to-minute gameplay looks good though. Attack animations are satisfying to watch, especially when the final blow ends with dramatic slow motion.
Nine Monkeys of Shaolin is a side-scrolling beat-em-up with some RPG elements in the form of a few skill trees and choice of equipment. For the most part, you're simply moving left to right until enemies climb out of the woodwork to stop your progress, at which point you're basically in a small arena until all of your enemies are dead. Unlike most older arcade beat-em-ups, the movement and combat in 9 Monkeys is fast and fluid. Combat is simple, but looks and feels great. As you progress, your moveset expands, increasing the variety of fun ways to kick ass. Almost everything about the fighting is super satisfying. Acrobatically dodging attacks, timing a counter to reflect projectiles, flying across the screen at a distant enemy with a powerful kick, and following it up with a barrage of smacks from your pole. Or even lifting multiple enemies in the air to stun them and then knocking each of them back down to the ground. Combat is satisfyingly punchy, hits feel powerful, and the way enemies ragdoll to the ground or over a ledge really sells that you're doing damage. The ease and fluidity of combat makes it fun to experiment with the different abilities. You can likely get through the game using the simplest attacks, but every skill is fun to use, and all of them have a noticeable effect on the flow of a fight. Completing missions generally gives you multiple skill points which you can spend to power up the attacks or skills you enjoy using most. You're even able to replay missions for smaller skill point rewards if you're interested in maxing out your skills. Several missions reward you with new equipment which add even more options to your arsenal, like a pair of shoes that makes your dodges damage enemies, or a pole that replenishes your health when you do certain attacks. It's impressive that every skill or item feels useful in some way.
The level design isn't exactly innovative, but there's decent variety and some clever ideas sprinkled in. Some levels are full of traps or other obstacles that force you to be careful with your movement, but it can be difficult to judge depth in these moments, to determine if you'll even be able to dodge obstacles. While there's no jump button in the game, you're sometimes required to use the dodge mechanic to bound over gaps in the floor. It's a neat idea, but in practice it can be quite frustrating. Falling makes the screen go black and resets both players at the leftmost edge of the arena, sometimes requiring you to repeat the same jump across a chasm, other times simply disorienting you during a fight. There's also a chance that you'll respawn slightly off screen and have to move around an unseen obstacle to return to the fight. Each chapter ends in a boss fight, but boss fights generally aren't much different from normal enemies, just with a lot more health. Some of them change up the gameplay slightly, or at least take place in an interesting environment, but they don't feel like a highlight. The structure of the chapters is a bit weird, where missions can be tackled in any order. Mission descriptions only hint at what you can expect, leading to moments where you potentially start a story-progressing boss fight before completing all the other missions in the chapter. This means that some missions could technically be considered optional, but at least you're able to play any missions that you might have missed.
Co-op is a staple of the side-scrolling beat-em-up game, and for the most part, it works very well in 9 Monkeys, but it isn't seamless. The co-op mode is drop-in, drop-out between missions, and the full campaign is playable with 2 players, who share the screen and are usually unable to move very far from each other. When resuming a game, bringing in the second character is done by interacting with a specific character in the hub. It's not that weird, but when initially starting the game, it allowed us to choose co-op from the main menu, so it's odd that it requires that extra step in subsequent sessions. Player 2 can play as a separate, slightly less interesting character that only occasionally participates in story-progressing conversations. Fortunately, I guess, the main protagonist isn't all that interesting either, and neither character is any less fun to play.
You'll notice in the hub that the camera only follows player 1, such that player 2 has to follow closely to stay on screen. Luckily, this is only a feature of the main hub and a single mission early in the game, but it's pretty baffling nonetheless. Player 1 is also prioritized in menus, where even if Player 2 opens a pause or upgrade menu, Player 1 is able to interact with it. Control isn't taken away from Player 2, Player 1 simply has more control. Both players earn the same skill points and items, and they can independently upgrade their skills, or change their loadouts to focus on what items work best for them, or what skills they enjoy using the most. Outside of the hub and that one level mentioned earlier, neither player is prioritized, and both players have all the same options available. Health and other consumables are voluntary pickups that can be banked for later in a level, so players can easily coordinate who picks them up. A downed player can be revived as long as the other player survives the combat encounter, so it's possible for one player to pick up the slack if the other is having a difficult time. But on the easiest setting, the game isn't difficult at all. One of the biggest problems with the game is level designs don't always lend themselves well to co-op play. Sometimes arenas intentionally limit your range of motion, like fighting on a narrow bridge, and the limitation is made worse in co-op, as there's no way for players to get by each other. This happens quite a bit and in multiple levels, but thankfully these moments are brief. Each level also only took about 10 or 15 minutes to complete, so the game is great for short sessions. A more consistent issue is the difficulty in distinguishing between players, due to the stylish lighting and color schemes of many of the levels, and the lack of distinguishing details between the player characters. We found ourselves losing track of our characters quite a bit for brief moments, but the arenas are small enough that it wasn't a major problem. Outside of the rare annoying moments in co-op, it was a lot of fun and very comical to gang up on enemies, either volleying them between us, or backing them into a corner to beat them down together.
Nine Monkeys of Shaolin is a fictional story loosely inspired by the real-life 16th century conflicts between Shaolin monks and the pirates that raided the Chinese coasts. You play as a fisherman seeking revenge on the pirates that attacked his village, and you receive help from the Shaolin monks who saved you. The game offers brief glimpses of Buddhist tradition specific to the Shaolin Temple, but takes a lot of historical liberties to craft a more personal story of supernatural adventure.
As interesting as the story is, the storytelling is rather scattered. Most cutscenes are lengthy, talking head exposition dumps, while major events happen in the short transition narration between chapters. Understanding the story requires a mix of reading mission briefs and following the dialogue between characters that just kind of show up before or after missions to explain what happened. The game would have benefited from more visual storytelling to complement the dialogue. Overall, the story does a decent job of gluing together the combat segments, although the mention of the monks taking a vow not to kill is hilariously ironic.
We noticed some occasional glitchy visuals, like twitching ragdoll bodies or discarded weapons spinning in the air for no reason. There were rare instances where the game slowed down for a few seconds, but nothing that became annoying or stopped our progress. Despite any issues, playing Nine Monkeys of Shaolin is some of the most fun we've had in the beat-em-up genre. The stylish levels, the ease of play, and the fluid, varied, and hard-hitting combat kept us eager to come back to the game for quick sessions over multiple nights. If you and a buddy have any love for beat-em-ups, this is one that's easy for us to recommend.